Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, or OMG, a podcast videocast with a panel of longtime, seasoned Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty Gensius, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who has collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and information that us seasoned users might be interested in. Today's topic is going to be about finding and removing digital clutter, managing your computer, whether it's your desktop, your hard drive, ways in which you can go about that. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, there are tons of resources. I don't think I'm going to be able to show all of the resources. I'll throw some in every once in a while when folks are talking and it might be relevant to the topic the best I can. But we have tons of resources and all of that will be available in the show notes. Let's find out who's with us on the panel today and start up with Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm a 78-year-old retiree here in Tucson, Arizona. Happy member of the Tucson Macintosh User Group. I've been around the Mac since the 128K model, first one in 1984. And I spent 9 years working with user groups and worked for Apple for another 9 years, and then finished my career at a university in the Bay Area doing IT work and end user support. Currently using relatively new stuff. I've got an M1 Mac Mini, a 16 Pro Max, Watch Series E. Doesn't sound too current, does it? 9th generation iPad. Maybe I need some updates. And Apple services too. Peter?
I'm Peter. I'm from Bay Village, Ohio, and I'm 72 years old. I enjoy learning about computers and related gadgets and sharing what I know with others, in particular this Old Mac Gang and the listeners and viewers who join us. Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob. I'm also in Tucson, and I'm still 70-something and part of the Tucson Macintosh User Group. I've been in Mac user groups since System 7, System 6, somewhere in there, and I'm enjoying it. Over to Gary.
I'm Gary. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, along with Marty and Peter. My primary tool is a Mac Mini. However, I have a watch and an iPhone like most everybody. I find the watch that I wear every day is helpful to let my family know where I am and where I am. So I enjoy, at my age, I'm 88, and I enjoy the simple things that the Mac can provide me as I age. Marty?
Yeah, well, before we get further in, it's nice to hear from listeners. And because I manage the YouTube website, I have to remember to look at notifications when I get there, because notifications is where I get notified that somebody has posted something to the website or to the YouTube thread. And this came from Seraphim Dunaway 8084 that commented, "This is fantastic. I am so glad I discovered you guys. I've been looking for something to listen to that's discussion about Mac like this in everyday use. Keep up the good work." Well, so we appreciate those comments and appreciate Seraphim Dunaway 8084 and glad you're listening and glad you're part of the Old Mac Gang. So tonight's topic is decluttering your Mac, finding and removing digital clutter. And as I said, there are tons of resources, and maybe I'll just flash through some of these as I can before we get into our questions. There's obviously backing up your Mac with Time Machine. And folks, you can talk too while these things come up if you wish, if you have any comments about it. I myself am not a Time Machine guy, never got into it. And I know we have some folks who use that, listeners and some of the Old Mac Gang that use it regularly. You can also, there's information from the support page of Apple on optimizing your storage space on Mac, using desktop stacks on Mac, which is kind of collecting all the common files, and Mac will do that automatically for you. This is another Mac user guide page that was put up. And then freeing up storage space on your Mac, and it gives you some examples in how to free up storage and ways to go ahead and do that. Then removing duplicate photos and videos and looking for, and this page is also a support Apple page, and you can choose basically your operating system, and it'll show you how to find those duplicates. There's also software that does that, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about those. View, save, or delete email attachments. More free up storage on email accounts for mail on Mac. Deleting messages and conversations and messages on Mac, changing general settings in the message app on the Mac, more freeing up storage, optimizing storage on your Mac, a program called Daisy Disk that I just purchased it. That's why it's showing up on this site as thanks for buying, but it finds and helps clean various types of files on your Mac, if you want that. Grand Perspective is also another one of those utilities that will show disk storage. Omni Labs also does Omni Disk Sweeper to find quick and large unwanted files. Gemini was one of the apps that I was alluding to earlier in terms of finding duplicates and taking out multiple copies of the same file. Dupe Guru is another one of those. And then Hypercritical finds files with identical content and then reclaims the disk space. And then one that I use regularly, and I used tonight because I was having some problems with my Bluetooth connection for my headsets. I went ahead and did clean my Mac and ran it and cleaned up a lot of space on it. So all of those links will be in the show notes. You can find them in the video file of the video stream on YouTube, or you can also find them with information under any of the podcast. It's part of the podcast notes that come with the podcast. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. I think it goes to Chris first tonight. Yeah. When your Mac feels messy, what does it look like for you, and what everyday tasks get harder because of it?
Well, having been a tech support guy for 30 years, I'm really used to this kind of stuff. So I tend to do a lot of day-to-day as I'm going along. But like, for instance, if my Mac is feeling sluggish, which is a very common complaint, I may just need to reboot. Or I might have an app that's, going rogue and taking too much RAM, and I'll check that with Activity Monitor. Excuse me. It could also be my 100 plus open tabs in Safari. But I also check the available disk space on the system drive, the internal drive, the boot drive, whatever you want to call it. It's usually Macintosh HD, and I can probably more quickly just do a search for file size greater than 2 gigabytes and look for anything that's, like an inadvertent video file that's taking up a lot of room or something like that. But I always like to keep 10% free. And if I use a lot of Adobe apps, so it's really closer to 20% free. By the way, there's also good apps. Daisy Disk is a good one to see if your, system drive is filling up, where the space is going. Because that might show you a single, video file that's 30 or 40 gigabytes, and you remove that and you're all set. And let's see what else. Oh, the other thing is I don't turn my desktop machine off at night because there are optimization and cleanup routines that the OS will do by itself. And so that helps a lot. Now, of course, with laptops, what are you going to do, right? But yeah, there are other apps for that. Peter?
Yeah, unlike my office or my garage or my attic, my Mac really hasn't been messy in years. I've become fairly good at keeping my desktop clear and my file folders well organized through kind of self discipline and some automation. Whenever I'm working on a particular class or project or assignment, I have a folder that the files go into, and I generally arrange that folder chronologically. So the ones I'm working on are right there at the top, and it's easy to click and open them. And I use an old Unix tool, which is in Mac called Touch. I can touch a file that's older, and it will instantly appear as if it's been modified recently, and it'll pop right to the top of that list, sort of like pinning it, but sort of a dynamic pin. So it's pretty easy for me to keep things tidy. But the one corner that I haven't conquered yet is tab groups in the browser. So, like Chris's 100 tabs, I have a tab group for every meeting or thing online that I routinely attend. So I have an old Mac group gang tab group, uh, and sometimes those load up with tabs because I open them during a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, I don't take the time to dispose of them. But I do have a nice Safari extension called Tabs to Links, which in any tab group, I hit that button, and all of the tabs in that group are on a little list with check boxes for me to turn into something I can put in a note or a document. And if there's links I don't want to go in, I uncheck them and I drop them into a document, and then I close them when I uh, have the wherewithal to do that. I should have said that I have two sort of junk drawer folders, one being the downloads folder and another being one I call desk drawer, which is the only folder I have on my desktop. And if there's stuff that would otherwise clutter my desktop, I just drop it there. And both of those folders have an automated uh, app called Hazel, which I can make some rules. And if something stays in those too long or gets too old, Hazel, organizes, puts them in the right place, or marks them for deletion, and then ultimately deletes them if I don't get around to it. So those systems work really well for me. And I probably should mention one more app. I know I'm getting a little long winded. I'll wrap it up. Um, I use an app called Hookmark, which means that the links I put to websites and files and things like that in these documents I use that go along with any particular project or task can be deep links. I don't just link to a file on my computer, I link to a spot in that file, or I link to a particular email that's associated with something. So, those couple apps and that sort of system of discipline keeps me pretty well organized and unmessy and never slow. Bob.
Well, Marty is talking about when it feels messy. To me, messy is in the eye of the messy. Um, I try to be relatively clean and organized on my desktop. However, there are times when I will reboot or use Clean My Mac X to keep up, and I try to keep up with my folder hierarchy. I'm not this kind of guy that does searches for documents. Seldom do that. I have a hierarchy that I started with logos many years ago, and I'm pretty much stuck with that. As a photographer, I do take a lot of photos, and when I import photos into Lightroom, I try to clean out the duds almost right away and give them star ratings and keep the 3-star ones and the 2-star ones and the no star ones I just get rid of. Gary?
Well, I tell you, the listeners and viewers can understand why I enjoy thinking about Peter and Marty and as my teacher. All my life, I've tried to be better organized, and it just doesn't happen the way it probably should. However, I too, Marty, used Time Machine at one time, and I've stopped using it because I never had a need to have a failure where I've been backing up with Time Machine. However, I learned then from Peter, I have carbon copy cloner, which I've been backing up external hard drives every week, one drive and then the next drive. I really don't have a lot of files. I'm usually working on one or two at the same time. And I've been able to use search to find everything that I need. So that's kind of where I am. This Daisy disc kind of caught my eye listening, and I'm going to plan to check it out after. Marty?
Yeah, I do a couple of things. I have multiple computers. I have one that is my home studio that I do the podcasts on, the vodcasts on, and I do most of my work sitting behind the computer that I'm using right now. But I also have a computer that I take to the office or is at the office, and I also have a computer that I take on the road with me. And so the first thing I do is make sure all of those devices are synced. And particularly, there's an option in Mac to sync desktops along the lines of the same Apple ID. So I sync my desktops, have done that for years now. And that means one desktop I go to has the similar organization that I have on the one at home. So I make my file folders on my desktop based on deliberate tasks that I have. So all of the materials that go into that. Now, as I teach at a university, so I have a folder that is for my fall classes, and inside that folder, there are subfolders for each of the class, and inside each of those class folders are the materials that I'm using for that class. So easy access for me to jump to that folder, find the information I need on a particular class if I'm doing that. And I use the same kind of logic for other aspects of work. So I have a folder for association work because I do a lot of professional association work. I have a folder for AI because I am doing lots of presentation and work with AI. I have a podcast work folder, which is where all of the files that we're creating from this podcast go into subfolders that are to each of the podcasts, and the particular podcast episodes have subfolders. So organization is important to me with the process. Now, I have a master folder that I call archive with a date following the archive. And that's where when the projects are done or the semesters are over, it gets dumped into that file. I do a little trick with the folders on my desktop. What I do is I underscore and sometimes double underscore the name of the folder, which will move it right up top. So the folders that I access the most are my fall class folder, and also because I direct a program that has that I have to have materials for. Those are underscored folders, so they move up to the top. So I look right up in the upper right-hand corner, and that's where 80% of my work is coming from. What happens is over the week, and just tonight, for example, I start to, every couple of days, I start to accumulate files from projects. And some of those files I leave out on my desktop because that's the active file that I'm working on. I don't use Time Machine. I just didn't want to spend the time syncing to either an external drive or a portion of the drive that I have. I use iCloud for all of my syncing, and for things that are not just desktop stuff, I put into folders into iCloud. And I also use Backblaze, which is another cloud backup service. I'll talk more about other strategies and what works for me with that. And when I do it with our next question, which is if you only had 15 minutes a week to tidy your Mac, what would you do first and why that and not something else?
Okay, well, first of all, just a quick thought on Time Machine. It's a no-brainer if you're a type of person who has a computer and, one big drive, which needs to be twice the size of your internal drive on the computer. And that way, I do that on my main work machine, even though I've got four external hard drives and a Time Machine drive, is because if my internal drive dies, I can restore it really quickly with Time Machine. And so that's always been a good idea. Now, if you're a more sophisticated user, you've got multiple computers, lots of stuff going on, different devices, maybe a small subset that's going to work. But there are cloud backups and cloning drives and other strategies, which you're hearing about tonight. But if you're a simple senior user and you've got a computer, like a MacBook Air, there's no reason that you can't go out and buy the appropriate hard drive and make sure it's all backed up. And God forbid you lose that laptop or something, you'll be glad you had the backup. Now, for me, switching gears here, I usually check both my backups. I use Backblaze as well and make sure they're working, or at least try to remember. Time Machine occasionally stops working for who knows what reason. So, it's a good idea to check it out and make sure it's still going strong. Um, let's see. I may clean up some files and folders. I tend to just put stuff where it's going to go initially, but I could definitely see how Marty has a different, obviously if you're a college professor, you've got different things going on. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Peter?
Yeah, 15 minutes. Traditionally, I would fire up Daisy Disk and look to see if there's some giant file somewhere that I've neglected to treat properly. And I would note that now you can go to System Settings and then to Storage and do a pretty close to Daisy Disk good job with just what's built into your Mac and what comes with it. I've also started to use a program called Hyperspace, which is a little different than the deduplication things like Gemini. What it actually does is, and I tend to, if I have a bunch of files for one project that I've used in a previous project, I just make a copy of them and throw them in the new project folder. What Hyperspace does is it looks at your whole drive and then it takes and gets rid of the extra files, but everywhere you had a reference to that file, it then points to the same place. So you really have one file that is appearing in different directories. And if that sounds like something you'd want to do, you might want to take a look at that. I want to make one comment about Time Machine because people talk about it. I've used Time Machine for a long time, and I use it because I make lots of revisions to old files. And sometimes in the process of revising something, I step on the file in a way that gets rid of something I wished I hadn't gotten rid of. And Time Machine allows me to go back to a version of that file from 15 minutes ago or 2 hours ago or 2 days ago, which can sometimes be a real a lifesaver to me. And I'd also comment that if you haven't used Time Machine recently, they've made major improvements to it in the last couple of years. I use a MacBook that is my main computer. I'm not syncing between different computers for the most part. But my Time Machine is, at home. But Time Machine now does a splendid job of caching all of the changes it would need to make to that place where the files are stored, which in my case is on a Synology drive. And when I'm at home, either through my network, through the Wi-Fi, or faster still, when I plug in my Thunderbolt cable, it then deals with it all and all gets it to the proper Time Machine. So that's something it wouldn't have done well or even at all several years ago. Bob.
Well, I use the Reminders app to remind me to use Clean My Mac X and Malwarebytes and do scans with those applications every month. Not sure if that really fits with tidying up your Mac. Um, in Safari or other browsers, I'm really not a tab kind of guy. Oftentimes, I will work up to having several tabs open, but when I close out Safari or quit it or other browsers, I always close all the tabs just because that's the way I work. Gary, how about you?
Well, if I had this extra 15 minutes, I would work more to clean up my desktop, to try to find some duplicates. And as I said, I'm learning a lot tonight from listening to all of you, and I'm going to try some of those programs to better organize my files. Marty?
Yeah, every other day I'm moving things from my desktop to respective desktop folders. So I'm looking at my desktop right now, and I have a lot of clutter left on it just from today. And for the last 2 days. I have some files on there that are essential because I'm involved in working with students who want to apply for our program. So those will stay on my desktop. But I also downloaded LLM Studio, which is an AI engine, and also Olama, which is an AI engine. And I have a tendency to download stuff to my desktop because from there I can move it where I need to move it. But I have the program files sitting on my desktop. Those will be removed, deleted, or I'll drop them in a folder called software if I want to go back and pull those out, or if I want to open them on another computer. If I'm opening another computer, it's like, oh, I want that on this computer. I can look in software. I've got some voice messages because my voice messages come in audio messages and I throw them on my desktop so I don't forget to respond to them. I've got some screenshots on here that I don't need. I also have the program for Daisy Discs that I downloaded earlier. So a chapter on radical therapy, which I wrote, that and some things that I pulled onto the desktop as I used an AI engine to generate a proposal for a workshop that I'm going to do. And it's old materials that I had used in previous workshops. So every couple of days, it forces me to look at it, particularly when I'm getting into the third row of icons on my desktop. It's like I need to clean some of this up so the folders are visible if I want to jump into something. To go back to a discussion it's kind of a running thread. We're talking about Time Machine. I was trying to figure out why I never got into that as a program. I think it's also the multiple computers and then having to kind of create that setup for multiple computers. But it was the bootable ability that that you can't create a bootable disk with it. It's a versioning software. Peter explained that in the sense of if he's working on a document and he wants to jump back 2 hours to kind of address what's going on with a document that he's working on. I generally just keep that document and I rarely move back unless it's something like a book chapter I'm working on or it's something else. If I'm going and doing a presentation with other people doing the presentation, I won't try to version it through Time Machine. What I'll do is just make PowerPoint topic V1, PowerPoint topic V2. And I have, a timeline of versions of files that I need. And then the one that I actually present or the one that we actually use is PowerPoint Final. And so when I'm searching for the latest version, I look for the titling in the file that has final in it. Or if I don't find a final, then I'm looking for the highest V number that's in the final, that's in it. And that's the process that I use. It allows me to jump back and look at earlier versions, things that I might have cut out for one presentation that was in an earlier version of another presentation. So yeah, I've never got on the time machine bandwagon. Gary mentioned carbon copy cloner, which I've used. And it was a reminder, maybe I need to get a disc and just do one, because I haven't done one in a while. I haven't done a carbon copy clone of what I've got going on this machine. But again, my programs that I have are similar on all machines, and the documents are all synced to the cloud. So I'm not sure it provides me a necessary experience, because if one of the machines crashes, then I can always go to the cloud and get the documents that I need to reinstate or reinstall on the machine. So the other one is SuperDuper is another program that'll do that. And both of those will give you bootable disks or bootable versions of duplicates of your computer hard drive. Part of me is like, if a hard drive is going to fail on me, if I have all the documents, which is what I do when I have them saved in cloud, I don't want to do a bootable disk that gives me a copy of the hard drive software that might have caused the failure that led to me having to do a reboot. I'd rather just do what they call a nuke and pave, which is just start with a fresh hard drive, and build up the computer from there. Third question, what would make you feel truly safe deleting things?
Okay, well, first of all, if you've got questions about backups, let me put in a plug for the Tucson Macintosh User Group, tmug.org. Come see us. We've got experts on backups, and we have an annual presentation that we do just about different backup strategies. So if you want to learn about it, that'd be a great place. I like I mentioned before, I do a cloud backup with Backblaze. I also use Time Machine backing up. I have it set with a app to just go off in the evenings when I'm not using the computer. So, I've rarely needed either one of them, maybe 2 or 3, 4 times a year. I don't really have a lot of stuff to throw away, except for photographs. I'm a photographer like Bob. So, but then again, I'm retired and I'm not in sort of production mode. When I was working, yes, I would have lots of files going on. And I admire Marty's strategy. I think that's something we could all learn from. So, Peter?
Yeah, I do feel safe deleting things. And what makes me feel that way is I have progressively made incremental archival storage of old stuff, sort of like what Marty was saying. When things get too old, they get archived. My stuff that's 20 or 25 years old is on individual hard drives, and I'm slowly moving those onto a Synology network attached storage, so that even those old archives can be close to instantly accessible. I mean, the archives are a little different than photos or, music or videos, which have separate spots on the Synology at this point. But those have worked very well. And with iOS, or with the operating system 26's dropping the support of what was it? What was the connector to disks for a while? Lightning connectors? No, what was the other one?
Oh,
There was a connector that was used for hard drives, which has been deprecated with the 26 operating systems. But I did note that my old hard drives from back then also have USB ports on them, and I checked that they're accessible before I totally go to 26, and I can still get at those.
Peter,
Bob.
you're talking about the old SCSI drives?
I'm talking about SCSI, but there was a particular connector that was better than USB and faster for a while. prior to
Fire-
FireWire. You
Thunderbolt?
got it, Gary.
Firewire, yeah.
Yeah, the
Firewire,
FireWire
right.
connectors are deprecated, but all of the drives I had that had FireWire connectors also have USB connectors, although they're slow. I tested one a couple days ago. But I can.
For me, Time Machine is a vital component because whenever I open an old document to make a new one, I try to save a copy at that point, but oftentimes I don't. And when I've changed something or screwed something up in the old document, I
I'm doing a live show
erase something I didn't want to erase, I will go into Time Machine and bring an old copy forward. I do this often enough that I can't believe that I would ever be without Time Machine. I also have a Synology, and I'm lucky enough to have a desktop machine and a laptop machine. I use the Synology like a big Dropbox. Everything on my desktop machine goes into Synology and then goes over to the laptop machine. And the same thing happens in reverse. If I'm working on a laptop when I'm away from the house, the new stuff goes over to the Synology and then back on the desktop. When that happens, that is not a versioned backup, just like putting stuff into iCloud is not a versioned backup. Sometimes you need those old versions. So I do that, and I also have a Time Machine backup for the laptop, and I have a couple of off-site backup hard drives that I rotate in and out every couple of weeks. So by my latest count, I have like 8 copies of every document. That's what makes me feel safe. How about you, Gary?
You know, you know, I've been thinking about this as we've been talking about feeling safe, and I really think there's this age difference between us in where the 5 of us are today. I'm really not so concerned about backup, and to find out more, Marty, maybe about having everything on iCloud, even though I've been, running Carbon Copy Cloner and putting stuff on hard drives. I really never had a hard drive fail. I've never known anybody. I know what Peter's talking about going back based on what he does, but I'm kind of decluttering in the sense of getting rid of stuff. And there doesn't seem to be much need for me to go back. As I shared before, I'm using 1Password because I got hooked on it. I'm my kids can get into my computer as well as friends. So I'm trying to live in the present moment. I'm moving a little bit from the 15 minutes. But I do think it's an age difference, Marty, with where each of us are and what our needs are. And as long as our needs are working for us and we know where to go, that's the key for me, of knowing where to go to find the answers that I need. So I'm just starting fresh, kind of, when I need something, and it's been working for me. All right, Marty.
I love your kind of Zen approach to the whole process, Gary. Kind of stay in the moment and don't worry too much or dread too much. And, if you look back, we do a lot of pruning of our computers, more so than I think average listeners do. So the idea of not having a hard drive failure because you're using things like Clean My Mac, because you're using things like Malwarebytes, those kinds of things, I think, is what makes disastrous things less happen to us, because we do that. But I think, I listen to my brother-in-law who sends emails and talks about how many times he's had to go to the Geek Squad at Best Buy to fix something that's going wrong with his computer. And I think we're a different crop, the five of us, because this is a thing that we're into. And so we do things like, do backups, run cleaning software for our like Clean My Mac, or and also run Malwarebytes on our Mac. So we're less likely to have those failures. And physical drives have gotten we're not using physical drives really anymore. We're using SSDs, and the failure rates on those, they happen, but they're much lower than what we experienced in the past, which is why backup, is preached in a lot of ways. I don't find a need to delete stuff. Bob, I agree with you. iCloud itself is not a versioning software. It gives you the current version. What's in my iCloud right now in terms of my desktop is what's on my desktop now, not what was on my desktop 2 months ago. With me, I double that by taking and dumping stuff into an archive folder and then moving that into a separate folder on iCloud. So that archive folder is really kind of the versioning stuff. So previous year's classes are in a folder that has that semester on it, sitting on iCloud. So I have access to that. I don't really delete files. I just buy more storage, and then use the principle of redundancy in terms of backup. The idea that you should have 3 copies of everything, the 3-2-1, 3 copies of everything. 2 of those copies should be safe and in formats that will allow you, in case one copy fails, the other copy will. And the 3rd copy should be off-site. And I guess off-site would include cloud. So if you're doing cloud storage, you've got that one that's off-site. And then if you're doing physical storage, Bob, you have a Synology. I have a Synology too. I've run into a problem. My Synology's full. And now it's like, what do I do? It's a 2-bay and both bays are full. And it looks like I'm in for another $1,000 for a new Synology if I'm going to stay with Synology. So there's expense involved in it, but the idea that you have to have this three copies, 2 of them on separate systems or separate storage, and the 3rd one in the cloud, the 3-2-1 backup, it will protect you and feel safe about deleting files because you have that backup and storage in other places. Any final comments for Peter was going to talk about versioning.
Yeah, just one quick comment about versioning that I thought of as we were talking about it. There are 2 programs that keep files in a different way that can thwart versioning. And one of them, I believe, is Apple Notes. It keeps all the notes in one big file. And the other is Freeform. So some of the more modern, quote unquote modern Apple apps, if they don't build versioning in, which I don't think they do, aren't going to be able to take advantage of versioning in Time Machine or any other system you have that does that.
Yeah, I was just going to add a quick thought on the cloud backups. There was a story going around, it may have been marketing for all I know, but that a photographer had unfortunately had a fire. One had a fire and the other one had a theft. And they not only stole his computer, but they stole his backup drive, his Time Machine drive. And in both cases, these guys lost years of work, and it was just not replaceable. At the time, I thought, this is a no-brainer to get something like Backblaze. It isn't the easiest thing in the world to set up if you've got a lot of large files. You might need to find a friend with a really fast network, take your computer over there and leave it for a couple of days. That's what I did when I first set it up. I brought it into my office at work at a university and used their T1 network to back everything up and just left it sitting in the corner of my office for about 4 days, and boom, everything was up in the cloud. But otherwise, it takes a while. But really, for risk of theft or loss, fire, etc., we've had so many fires in the western U.S. I can't imagine how with the LA fires, how many people lost their computers, their computer work, their backups, and that's when a cloud backup or any offsite backup really. Bob has a different strategy he might share with us, but it's really essential to have that.
Bob, do you have another thing to share with us, or is Chris setting you up?
Well, Chris isn't setting me up, but my backup strategy is complex enough that I don't really want to go into it tonight. If we did a podcast on backup, I'd be happy to bore you for about 10 minutes to tell you how I do that.
Bob,
I
please.
was referring to your sharing a drive with Kurt.
Oh, okay.
Bob, yep. Please don't sell yourself short. You can bore us for 20 minutes.
I have a friend here in Tucson that I see a couple times a month, and we each have a portable hard drive, and we do backups to that portable hard drive. I have one, he has one. I do a backup or a clone of my home folder to that portable hard drive. And then when I see him, I take the portable hard drive, I give it to him, he gives me the one that he has, and then I go back and I do the same thing to the one I just got. So basically I have a copy of my home folder that is no older than 2 weeks. So I have one offsite. I think offsite is important as well.
Yeah.
I think this would be sneaker net with wheels.
You must really trust that friend of yours. I don't know if I want Peter to see what's on my home drive.
Well, I don't encrypt anything, and I don't think Kurt encrypts anything either. I've never looked.
Well, that's our next podcast. Let's talk about Kurt's files next time. Let's dox Kurt.
I have it right here.
Well, I think if anything, this episode has given me a kick in the pants to take a look at Hazel, which was a program that I used and played around with for a while, to also take a look and go back to Carbon Copy Cloner and SuperDuper and get a timestamp of what's on this computer that I have right now, just as a protection for full clone if I need to do a full clone review of things. With that being said, I think we've come to conclusion of another show, and we've, I think, gone pretty much the full time. Email us at ThePodtalkNetwork@gmail.com. Your feedback helps us tailor programs for you age-seasoned users like us who want to continue using our Macs to make our lives more enjoyable, just like Seraphim Dunaway 8084 did. Yeah, I got that right. I had to roll back the show notes to find that out. So send us an email at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com. Our website is thepodtalk.net, and you can find out about all different shows that we do there. So we're going to wrap up this episode. Our next live episode will be Wednesday, August 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time through YouTube, where you can watch this crew at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the live show. Share this with your friends and with your Mac user groups if you're part of the Mac user groups. Our music bed is by Philip Gross Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive, part of the Creative Commons. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to our group, Chris, Peter, Gary, and Bob. Thanks for being part of the Old Mac gang, and we'll see you next time.